And we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Tek Caffe podcast. I'm 𝗬𝗏𝗍𝗆, your host for today. The Tek Caffe podcast was launched in 2023 with a simple mission to empower the software development community through meaningful conversations. Since its launch, we've had the honor of hosting incredible voices in the field, including 𝗬𝗏𝗀𝗆𝗍𝗵, Jeff Langer, Paige Watson, and many more. Our focus is on extreme programming and its technical practices like test-first development, continuous delivery, and beyond. And as AI continues to reshape our industry, we've made it a point to explore its impact on how we build software today. That said, we are thrilled to have with us a very special guest, Tim Ottinger, here to talk to us about safely coding with AI. Thank you so much for being with us today, Tim.
I am happy to be here. Thanks for the call. And of course, I'm happy to accept.
Tim began programming in 1979 and has since worn many hats: developer, author, trainer, consultant, and coach. He's known for his hands-on, agile-rooted approach and has contributed to landmark works like Clean Code, Clean Agile, and Agile in a Flash, co-written with Jeff Langer. Tim has long been a thought leader in our industry. Through his writing, whether on the Industrial Logic blog or elsewhere, he's helped shape how we approach technical excellence and modern software practices. And with AI tools now becoming a daily part of our development workflow, his insights couldn't be more timely. So, without further ado, I'd love to hand it over to Tim to get us started. The floor is all yours, Tim.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Well, welcome to a certainly unusual time. So I'd like to introduce you to a couple of ideas, but let me give you a little pre-shadow. It's been a weird couple of years, huh? With the AI thing coming along. Let's just flash this up real quick, if you would, Ahmed. Weird is just an alternate spelling of unfamiliar, right? Sometimes people see something they weren't expecting, they hadn't planned on it, it didn't fit with the way they'd been doing things, and they look at that and they go, "Oh, I can't do. Oh, that's disgusting. It's weird. Oh, I won't eat that food. It's weird." Right? A small child, the first time you give them a vegetable that they haven't seen before, "Oh, that's weird. I won't eat that. It's weird." And not just children, adults, right? We kind of have to learn to taste our food again, right? It's like going to a new restaurant and ordering a new dish you've not had before. You want to see, well, what's this really like? And if I don't like it, what is it I don't like about it? And is that a permanent thing or a temporary thing, right? Well, it's been weird times because AI is new. Admittedly, the world has come to terms with things happening in the cloud. The world is still trying to come to terms with some basic ideas of XP. It just hasn't happened yet. A recent report was 1.2% of developers worldwide are using TDD. One of the few things being repeatedly proven scientifically and in peer-reviewed papers and studies and pretty much everywhere to work. The other thing, of course, that was first proven about extreme programming was pair programming. Scientifically proven, double-blind studies. If you want to get the book, there is a book for that. How come people aren't doing it? Well, it's proven to work. That doesn't necessarily mean they want to do it. It's weird. It's unfamiliar. Well, before I dive into the AI side of this, there's a series of things that I started writing before I got involved with any kind of vibe coding or prompt engineering or the like. And it's a very simple idea, but pretty crucial, I think. So you see this 5-step picture. Everybody wants to have safe releases. Everybody, wants things to be easy. But there's a sequence to this, right? So if we were to take a look at the Industrial Logic website, which I can do, it is industriallogic.com/blog, and you can find my articles there. And it describes these, the Clean Start Protocol. What does that mean? So I'm going to walk you through these very shortly, because these are going to provide a basis for the rest of the discussion. So the idea of the Clean Start Protocol is that before I begin work on something, I have some task or story. Before I dive in and start to actually make any code changes, I should first make sure that I have a clean workspace. I'm not talking about your desktop. Good Lord, you should see mine. It's disturbing. I have at least 3 or 4 glasses of beverages here. Tea. So I'm talking about your workspace. So you work in a directory on a machine somewhere. Okay. What if you do a git status? Is it clean? Or do you have files lying about from prior work, maybe data files, maybe objects, bins, whatever else happens to be in the way, database files? Is it a mess, or is it really current? Well, could you just maybe reclone it if it's a big enough mess? Delete it and reclone it, but start clean so that when you do git status, there's nothing. And by the way, the git clean works pretty well too. So make sure you're current. You do a new pull, make sure you're current with your development branch. We're trunk based, so main is our development branch. Yours may be different. So you pulled everything. Okay, did you update your environment? If you're in Python, did you do a UV sync? Did you do npm install? Did you update your environment? Are you using the current of everything according to the project you're working in? So I have nothing left over Git-wise, no junk left in my file system. I am current because I've done a pull. I've updated my environment, and then run all the tests. Are you sure that the version of code you pulled down and built on your machine just now is valid? And the reason this is important is, I suppose, you think it would be totally obvious when you think about it. But if you've never thought about it, maybe this is the time. I've started on work, and a few hours into the work, I found an error. Something wasn't working and a test wasn't passing. And I thought, oh my gosh, what happened? So I spent the rest of that day looking for what I've done wrong that has broken the code. What I didn't realize was I had done nothing. The code was bad to begin with, but I never ran the test. This has been years ago. And since then, I have always maintained a clean start discipline. And in fact, I usually script it. So we have scripts that do this. They pull, they update, they run all the tests, they check to make sure everything's clean. And if all the tests run and everything else is right, I know that from here forward, any problems I have are my own. So the clean start is probably the first most important thing you can do. Does this matter with AI? We'll get to that in just a second. The second item you see here is the one about easy recovery. And this is about doing micro commits. So I make a small change and the tests all run green. I may freely make a local commit. Easy to do. You can do that too if you run your tests often enough. This matters because the next thing I do may introduce a problem. And it's really nice to be able to do a git reset hard and go right back to where everything was fine and maybe take a new run at whatever I've just messed up. So easy recovery is really key. That's your second stage. The third one is feedback. Can I get someone's opinion? Can I make sure that the tests all pass? Can I be sure that, that I'm in the right path? How can I check that? Well, there are, of course, tests. But if I can deploy it somewhere, then I can also have my sponsors look at it. Or if I'm in the same room with them, I can just call them over to look at it. And maybe, on Zoom, have someone take a peek. Tell me what they think. And nowadays, we can also use some automated feedback that we haven't talked about yet. So given that we had a clean start, we have micro commits for easy recovery. We have fast feedback from various sources. Our next step is easy integration. This is more important than people realize. This only is important at scale. If you're one person working on a project, you have nobody else around, you don't have to collaborate with anyone, there's no other people in your code base, this is not a big deal. You make the change, you make the next change. There are no integration problems. But let's say instead you're in a company, and in your code base, there are 30 to 500 developers, right? And while you're making changes, they're making changes. 𝗬𝗏 described CI, continuous integration, as the idea that every valid change on your machine makes it to all of your colleagues' machines as fast as possible and no longer than 1 day. So constantly, your changes are being integrated with other people's changes. You've started at different places in the code base. When you checked out 3 days ago, I checked out today, somebody else is going to check out tomorrow. How do we know that our changes are going to merge gracefully back together? Git's pretty smart. It does a good job. The algorithms for merging are quite excellent. But you know that my changes may work and your changes may work, but when we merge them together, maybe not. This is a problem of scale. And by the way, it's a PR problem. So you made a change and yours worked and passed all the tests. I made a change, mine worked and passed all the tests. My code gets merged first. Then when they merge your code in, it's all broken because you and I made incompatible changes. But now you have a PR problem because it looks like you didn't do a good job and I did. Well, how do we avoid that? By having the integration problems happen as early as possible. So I'm going to give you a little story and a picture. Here's my picture. I grew up in the US Midwest in the North, and we get snow. I go outside and I shovel the snow. I get an inch or two of snow down. I take my plastic shovel out. 10 minutes later, I'm done and back in the house drinking cocoa. My son didn't want to go out and work with me on it. He said, "Dad, why don't we just wait till it's done snowing and then take all the snow out all at once?" I said, "Well, that's an idea. I understand where you're coming from, but you'll find out you can remove an inch or two of snow in 15 minutes. But when you have a few feet of snow, when you're dealing with a meter of snow, it's a lot of work." Later on, we illustrated that example because we received a meter of snow overnight. And we all went out and spent the entire day removing it from our little driveway. Our car was buried. You could only see the wing mirror. We had to go get everything cleared out and find a way for people to leave the driveway and get onto the streets. So what I learned is if you do things when they're easy, you don't have to wait until it's hard. And this is an important fact to hold in mind as we start talking about things like integration. If our code is always integrated, then release is not hard and merges are not hard. And by the way, if we keep our tests fast from the beginning, we can always get the feedback from our tests to see if our latest merge worked correctly. We'll know when something goes wrong. So these things all add up. And with a bit of automation, the unwritten chapter in this story, watch this space, come back and see the blog in a few weeks, is the safe release. Well, let's say that you start in this case, right? This is a very XP way of working, right? You do small releases, you do them often, you continuously integrate, you have shared code ownership, everything's wonderful there. Clean starts, obvious thing to do. Easy recovery, well, maybe we didn't have micro commits in 96, but we have them now. Git made that easy. Obvious addition, micro commits. Fast feedback have always been a big part of XP. Easy integration, continuous integration, always been a part of XP. And making safe releases, they originally said, as often as once a month to once every few weeks, and now we're doing it every so many minutes. If you're in a continuous deployment shop, you may make somewhere between 5 and 500 releases a day to production. I don't know your situation, but these are all possible things. So this is kind of the water I swim in. Do I TDD everything? I TDD nearly everything. Sometimes I don't know the framework and I can't yet. So while I'm learning, I may first have to go in and wade in and see what it's like, and then I can start TDing after. I may do some test after. I may have built something that I want to hold on to when I didn't know what I was doing. But now things are different. One of the nice things today is that we don't have to spend as much time learning. I mean, not only can we ask an AI for a learning plan, which I had not even dreamed of until very recently. Of course, you can have the AI explain code to you and suggest how to go about making changes and suggest designs. You can go through some of that fast, but still, whether you're just doing regular prompt engineering or you're doing full-blown vibe coding, it still makes sense. If you want to do it well, to be safe, and the safest way to start is with a clean start. You should have a script. When you sit down to work, you should be able to make that happen. I don't think I need this visual anymore, but if you wanted to take a look at the Industrial Logic blog, you'll get much more information. But that's the 5 important steps. Put the system into a known valid state and prove it before beginning the next unit of work. At this point, of course, it's current, so you can start asking your AI more about the code base. And the questions won't be outdated or based on, stale information. It's a good thing to have a clean start. I have never had a stronger need to do micro commits. So I make a change, I run the tests, I commit locally. Then I ask the AI, please change this other thing. Please add this. Please make a modification. It's not 100%. Part of that is me. I am not a professional researcher. I don't have, 7 years of prompt engineering. I watch videos. I've spent time this year. I've developed some products, some, mostly internal products for myself. But I've also used AI in production situations. But I'm not an AI expert. So I am going to prompt poorly sometimes, and I'm going to make mistakes. But also, the AIs aren't all that perfect. I mean, we learn things, we give them good rules files, we give them better prompts, we learn to describe what we need better. But sometimes you ask it to make a small change, maybe even a change to CSS or a change to some bit of HTML, and suddenly the buttons on your app stop working. So what you need to do is be able to back up to the last safe moment and say, okay, that didn't work. I've reverted. Here's what we're going to do now, right? And come up with a new way to ask or ask for a different thing or just make the change yourself, right? AI isn't going to be perfect. It's going to make mistakes. And if you don't have the tests and you don't have a safe checkpoint to return to, you're going to be up against a wall and fighting your way through, well, what mistake did it make? How did it make it? What do I have to do to recover? How badly did it damage this? What's the diff from the last time I checked out or pulled? Or, and if you have changes left over in your file system, you're going to struggle with those. So the easy recovery and the clean start are really crucial now that we're dealing with AIs, whether it's just completion or full-blown vibe coding, which also goes back to fast feedback. By the way, I am embarrassed to say my very first one of my JavaScript apps that I did vibe coding, I didn't set up in the rule file to tell it that it must validate the HTML and CSS and JavaScript. So it didn't. Up in the corner, the right-hand corner of WebStorm, which is the editor I'm using, we get to use JetBrains tools as a part of an agreement. We don't get any commission or anything, but we get to use them because we built a plugin once. So up in the corner where it shows the warnings and errors, it's got yellow triangles saying that there's a bunch of warnings. And then along the right side in the gutter, there's all of these yellow stripes and sometimes a couple of red ones. The red ones are errors that weren't there just a moment ago because it's not validating. It's not checking its work, right? It's not checking against the test. It's not checking it against validators. It's not necessarily following standards. Give yourself a rules file. And you know what? The AI can write its own rules file. So you can tell it, here's what I want this to be like. Comply to industry standards, validate, the CSS, the HTML, scan and lint, the JavaScript, the Python, whatever, and let's make sure all the tests still run. You can start giving it information. It can rewrite that into a good rule file or a good prompt for you. And then you can generate from that. That's been a big learning curve. I know it seems obvious, and some of you are much more experienced in this than I am, but it still bears saying that if you don't tell it to validate, it doesn't need to. So the feedback, can be automated. And of course, every once in a while say, okay, evaluate this code and review it as an expert in the language. And it'll come back and say, oh, these pieces could have been differently. You could have used this function instead of that function, critiquing its own work. And of course, it's feedback. By the way, the rule of feedback generally is this. You've received an assessment or an opinion. If you agree with it, you can make use of it as you choose. And if you disagree with it, then you don't have to follow it. Me, I just love to not have any warnings, any errors. I just like a clean corner. So ensure that you're doing work that matters and doing it well. It's never a bad time to do the right things. And then, of course, integration problems. This, again, is a problem of scale. And if you're the only person using this code base, you can probably ignore this. You can't have an integration problem. But when you have a few, even a few developers, the thing that bothers me is that in my use of an AI coding assistant, it tends to make big changes. It produces big fat patches and then applies them. And suddenly it changed 50 or 60 lines of code. Maybe it could have done the same thing in 5. Maybe it could have shuffled around the existing code. But no, it generated a big body of stuff. So, all right, how do I make sure that my changes integrate? And what if somebody else has made changes? Well, one of the other tricks about easy integration is to divide your work up to be very modular. So maybe you and I won't change the same files at the same time. So small changes. And then also, of course, do not allow your changes to sit and rot before meeting other people's changes. You really have to keep it frequent. And when you merge, it can go wrong. So you need the feedback. And when the feedback says it's not good, you need the recovery. And if you can't recover, then you're probably going to be back to a clean start and going again. It's just the way that works out. Managing those disciplines and staying with it, very useful. And then, of course, at the end is we want whatever we build to be able to be released in a predictable and deterministic way. So automation, you can automate parts of your pipeline. And there are tools to automate that. And you can get a lot of assistance from your AI assistants now, right? They can help you to validate your pipeline and how it works out. There are tools for testing GitHub Actions and other mechanisms. So we're not stuck. But of course, this is hard for people to do because people are used to sitting where they are, quickly jumping into the problem, producing the code as fast as possible, throwing it out there, and maybe writing a test or two for the sake of coverage. I am not a big fan of coverage. If you're doing TDD and BDD, if you're using good disciplines and style, you probably don't need a lot of that. But I guess that takes us out of the realm of TDD and extreme programming with an AI and into maybe a new realm. I'm interested in what you've learned. What have you seen in regards to recovery, feedback, integration, and release in your journey so far in this very weird, which is to say unfamiliar world where AI is now a pair programming partner, a member of the team, and a kind of a constant in our lives? Ahmed, how about you?
Thank you very much, Tim, for this introduction. And yeah, you've asked a very important question. Yeah, things are going really fast these days, and we are hardly keeping up. And we were having a talk, you and I, just before we went live, and I was telling you I was invited to be a panelist in the software testing days in Cairo last Monday. And they asked me what are the current risks of everything we're seeing right now in this, as you've said, strange era we're living in. I think that the biggest risk is rushing into things. Without giving it enough chance for experimentation first. Okay. Now, I see people start using AI assistants directly into their workflow. And so in the past, we used to Google and we used to Stack Overflow. Now we use ChatGPT and likes, prompting, producing code, copying, paste that code, and hoping that it will work from the first run. So we're basically repeating the mistakes of the past, but with different tools. And I think during the Monday's conference, I've heard someone say that a fool with a tool is still a fool. And a fool with AI could be a dangerous fool. Because AI has a lot to offer, but if you're going to use AI the wrong way, it's basically garbage in, garbage out. I mean, this is something that is never going to change. So I think we are rushing into things, trying to like catch up. But in doing so, we're not giving ourselves the chance to experiment and see how we can use the technology well. And we're going to end up messing things the way we used to mess them up, but using, primitive technologies in comparison with what we have today.
Yeah. So one of my old bosses many years ago, probably before most people were looking for jobs, used to say that, with a computer and a program, you can make disaster faster.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's absolutely true. There's an ability to produce code faster, to have more code generated, and that certainly will create disaster faster if you're not approaching with discipline. The biggest problem with rushing is that people have a tendency to use that moment to abandon their disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And XP was always a disciplined approach. TDD is always a disciplined approach. Whatever modern methods you're using, all of them, I'm sure, are suggesting that you not throw caution to the wind and just run roughshod over your code base. But I don't want to sound too grandiose about this. Realize that as a species, we're still trying to figure out social media and making a mess of that, right? And then suddenly, as a species, we're having to deal with AI as well, and generative, agents writing code and all of these things. And really, for most of us, what that means is that we have automated look it up on Stack Overflow and copy paste your code. And it wasn't a good idea before. You should never have any code in your code base that you don't understand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I can generate that code, why do I need to understand it? Because it's your code, right? You don't know where the problems are. It's disturbing how much it's just cut and paste without understanding. And you don't know what a good job it did or bad job if you don't have the test for fast feedback and you don't have an easy way to recover. By the way, if you're not afraid to go back, if the word git revert -- hard, if that phrase doesn't terrify you and you know that you're not going to lose more than 5 minutes worth of work, you're not afraid to try something radical, to try something new that you've not used before, right? You might accept a big change just to see what happens because you can always revert it. You don't lose anything. But if your back is up against the wall and now you're 8,000 lines of generated code into your third day of a feature and it's going badly, you're afraid to go backward and you're afraid to go forward and you're afraid to be where you are, right? That's just too much stress. We've got to learn how to handle the pace. And a lot of that is always being able to go back, to revert safely, run all the tests, make sure that you're clean, and then start again. It's a huge difference. And it's an old discipline.
Yeah. In Tidy First, Kent Beck explained a concept that he has been talking about a couple of years before he published the book, and that was the concept of reversibility.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need this today more than ever. What I like about your series of articles is that they touch on something that was described long ago in the book Lean Software Development by 𝗟𝗏𝗄𝗏 𝗧𝗶𝗵𝗏, and that was starting with hygiene. Mm-hmm. We need that today more than ever. Okay, so it's basically going back to the key foundational practices: version control done the right way, coding standards, build automation with CI, and automated testing, developer tests, user tests, etc. We need this today more than ever. And I think what I've just mentioned earlier, these are the, like the essential prerequisites of the Clean Start protocol, easy recovery, fast feedback. So we need this today more than ever, because as you've said, things are really getting dangerous. And about code ownership, we're going to get to that, but let us first take some questions from the audience. So we have a question from Paige Watson. So what are your thoughts on the dumbing down of developers by letting AI do the knowledge work?
Well, what was the old adage? If you think it's expensive for experts to develop your system, wait till you hire amateurs to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know that people become less intelligent. There is a discussion about that, right? That there are topics, articles, people are saying, well, when our people started letting AI do most of the work, they stopped being curious and they stopped learning about their code. They just took it for granted. I would hate for that to be the truth, but I understand how people in a hurry would accept the code and not bother to read and understand the techniques that were used. I think it's certainly possible. I haven't seen it myself yet. I'll leave room for that. It could happen yet. It is a disconcerting thought, right? I don't think that we need less competent people producing more software. I don't think that's the answer to the software crisis that the world is having. A lot of badly written stuff isn't going to help us. And I know that at the same time, it would be rewarded in many places. There are plenty of companies that they don't care if it's good. They care if it's fast, quickly done, so they can imagine more things. It's going to happen. It's going to be a thing. right? If the climate doesn't change, if people don't learn lean principles, if people don't learn to use discipline, then the fast and unsafe way of working will become dominant just long enough for it to make it unworkable. And at some point down the road, they're going to be hiring programmers like crazy to come and fix all the terrible things that have been done. I think the smart companies won't have much of this problem, but I think that companies under a lot of time pressure, real or imagined, probably will have a lot of this, because the climate almost guarantees. I mean, really, they've been dumbing down developers by hacking and slashing and using brute force. How many people, are even within 5 versions of the current version of their language anymore, or even know 40% of the language features or 20% of the standard library? The idea that they don't need it and they can still get things done has been enough that a lot of people work at the same low level of competence for a long time. So it's already happening without AI. This will just make it faster.
There's something I want to add to your answer here, that the problem right now with AI is not just dumbing down developers. There's also the problem of exploiting smart developers. Now, what I've seen some companies do, part of my job as a consultant, that the project managers, they go promise customers that they will deliver things sooner and faster because now they're using AI. And in the background, what they're actually doing is making developers work extra hours and on weekends. And that's the rule. It's not the exception. So we've told this to the client. We told them we're using AI and we're going to use AI, but we're going to mitigate any risk by, burning the midnight oil. And that's just terrible. Mm-hmm. So it's not just dumbing down developers. It's also exploiting them. And I think that's even more dangerous than dumbing down developers. So I'm not sure if these kind of practices happen in your part of the world, but they most surely happen in ours. I remember once reading that legacy code written in Western countries is what led to software development flourishing in developing countries. Why? Because you want to offshore that legacy code to countries where the man days are cheaper so that they would maintain that code with more resources. And I think we are probably going to be seeing that again, but this time with AI. And people in developing countries are also going to be using AI, so they should be fixing that legacy code faster. Interesting times, huh?
Yeah, there's another piece to that though, and I'll just throw that out there. We have known for years and years, decades and decades, that we can produce software faster. But to do that, you would have to take on different practices. Some of those practices involve people working together in groups. It's a lot faster. They deliver more things more often. The throughput's higher, the quality's higher. Often the defects fall to near zero or to zero. And using lean software techniques, right? Instead of everybody works on their own, and then we have 18 levels of quality gates they have to pass through, all operated by human beings and monitored, and all the rework involved. The whole scatter gather system we could talk about sometime. These ways of working are inherently chaotic, inherently unpredictable, and the quality problems are totally predictable. It is obvious that these ways can't work, but it feels like going fast because they think that breaking things up into assignments, And having them done asynchronously means they're going to be done parallel, and parallel is a misspelling of efficient. And if it's not efficient enough, of course, everybody's salaried, so their hours are free. These ideas haven't worked yet. They've always been a problem. We've just got away with it quite a bit as an industry, right? But they don't work. If you really want to work, you change your way of working so that next month it's easier to accomplish things than it was last month. And if you just keep shooting in that direction of technical excellence, you can use any tools you want. The trick is that make it easier next month for your people to be accomplished. Make that a thing. Well, that's probably going to be learning, changing the work styles, collaborating better, psychological safety. Better tooling is a big part of that. My God, please don't write Python in VS Code if you can help it, and certainly not in Notepad. And a lot of people use their IDEs as if they were just Notepad. You could probably get a 20% speed up just by learning your stack and tools. But that's beside the point. This is a thing that happens, and you could get much higher performance without working your people harder, without AI, without these other kinds of problems. But people are unwilling to do those things, often for reasons of optics and power structure.
So before
AI
we went live,
AI is the next hope to avoid lean software practices.
yeah. So before we went live, you said something about people being, most people, not all, being open for extension, closed for modification. So can you perhaps just tell people about that?
Yes. So, earlier on, we visited the idea that weird is an alternate spelling of unfamiliar. When somebody says something's weird, it just means they don't know it. It's not what they're used to, right? And if you think about people, most people don't taste their food. They really don't. You can eat a whole meal and never really taste any of your food. You only barely taste enough of it to recognize it. So if you're expecting, I don't know, a McDonald's hamburger, common enough experience, and you taste a hamburger and it doesn't taste like the McDonald's hamburger, you're taken aback. What? That's not what is this, right? You thought you ordered a Coke, you ordered a root beer or tea. And as you sip it, oh, this is gross. And it's not even something you don't like. It's just something that you weren't expecting. Most people are like this. If somebody comes up with something that isn't their usual way of working, then they respond to it as if somebody just gave them, a turd on a burger bun. It's, the panic of that. Oh, no, I would have to work with other people. No, I would have to write tests first, is such a shock. It's not what they're used to. So they're perfectly open to the next thing in the path they're already on. You can give them an extension, right? I already believe that solo programming is the best, and you're going to give me solo programming, with from home. Yeah, okay, that's great. Solo programming with quiet hours. Okay, but what if you actually get better results by collaboration? No, that's 90 degrees off of the path I'm heading on. I can't hear that. That's too much for me. So people tend to be open to extension in their current direction, closed to modification in their path. But the future belongs to those people who do taste their food. After all, your favorite dish is probably one you haven't met yet. What's your favorite food? Well, what was the one before that? When did that change? Well, when you tasted the new food, it took first place. The other food took second place, right? You will meet something more wonderful if you continue to keep your mind open and, taste your life. See what's there. Try to keep an open mind.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Okay, so we have a question from Jeff Langer. So how, if at all, has your incorporation of LLMs in your programming work changed how you practice TDD and other XP elements? That's a good question.
Yeah, well, that's Jeff. Jeff doesn't ask bad questions, neither does Paige.
I had one like that prepared, so I'm not going to ask you that. So yeah.
Well, then apparently so
Jeff.
do you. There are a few different places. So, by the way, when I'm working in an unfamiliar stack, there's a lot more LLM stuff happening, right? So I don't know what the test should look like. So, hey, you know, Claude, write me some tests for this function. So the code already exists. That's not TDD, I know. But here's, you know, it generated a thing. Write me a bunch of tests around that. And so it starts writing me tests, and I can see, well, what frameworks did it choose for the tests, and how did it write the tests, and did it get a good job or a bad job? Which, by the way, you can also prompt it to have only one action per test. So yeah, you just he asks stupid questions all the time, just internally, he says. So also with refactoring, I can come into a piece of code, I'm looking at it, I realize that this function is doing too many things. I extract a function out of it because I want to change the code in that area. Hey, LLM, write me some tests around this. And it does. And maybe I might ask it for a couple more. Maybe I'll add some by hand. Maybe I'll improve them. But now I can refactor. So the idea of legacy code, you know, is code without tests. I can quickly go from raw legacy code to at least partially covered legacy code in seconds. And if the tests are decent and they pass, I can commit and then start my refactoring or additional tests. With TDD, it's interesting because it's a different shape with some of the code generation. So I'm actually providing examples, sort of like you would with like a BDD scenario, and then having the LLM, the agent or whatever, generate code with those things in mind. And examples go a long way. And of course, if I can get those coded up as tests, that's helpful too. But when it's time for me to take over, you know, I like to have a test already there, and I run the test continuously. That's the same. I modify the code. I watch the corners. I do the clean start. I make sure I have micro commits. I do the easy recovery. Always save my game before a boss fight. So if I'm going to get in there, I'm going to make sure I committed first and everything was green. And, you know, again, just integrating. So not a lot has changed. By the way, I really love the 2 times out of 5 when it offers code completion and it's exactly right. And usually, by the way, those are the times when the thing that it's offering for completion for, you know, a whole paragraph of code was something that was going to be tedious rather than something that was going to be clever or smart or careful. Right. So I do like that. And I really just love what LLMs have done to code completion and for quick hints.
Yeah, that's great. I want to take this as a chance actually to appreciate what you and Jeff Langer are doing, giving us hope with using AI the right way in software development. I think it's good to mention that Jeff has invented something called AI-assisted development with verification, AADV, and with a methodology called create, assess, execute. So along with the series of articles Tim is writing, if you want to take your, you know, AI-assisted development game to the next level, the stuff Jeff Langer is doing is really good too. So I'd like to take this as a chance to really appreciate what you guys are doing. Maybe there's not the you know, coordination and syncing, but it's all on the right track, and yeah, very much appreciated. Okay, so I had a question. What AI coding assistants are you using? So you've mentioned JetBrains, so I'm assuming you're using their plugin.
Yeah, so I'm using a few of them. I'm not so far along. I was just reading, no, I guess I was watching some videos on YouTube where people a little more advanced than me have recognized the differences between them and can say, well, this one's better for code generation. These other, this one's better for refactoring. This one's better for reasoning about the code. So they've even recognized the character of the different AIs. I'm not maybe quite that sophisticated. So mostly, let me see, what am I currently set on? I'm on Sonnet 3 something. Has been doing most of the stuff. I go to, here we go. Oops, that's the wrong one. Just a second. I'm going to pull it up and give you the correct answer rather than try to remember it. So I've been doing Claude 3.7 Sonnet and 3.5 Haiku and GPT 4.1. Those are the ones I've been mostly playing with. Sonnet's pretty darn good at generating new code. And if you tell it to, it actually produces it with pretty good naming and formatting and a lot of the things you used to have to complain about. It seems to do pretty well. I've just been reading over the code it generated. It did some JavaScript for me. And as I'm reading through, it's like, you know, this is good blue collar working class code. This isn't fancy and it's not obnoxious and not hurried and messy, sloppy. You know, this is good stuff. And it's won me over.
No, that's good. And I think your answer is the popular opinion. Most people are saying that Claude Sonnet is the model to go for in coding. I've heard people say that Gemini is good at planning. GPT is good at understanding what's in an image. So like if you're going to develop like a feature in a piece of software where you have a form, for example, it's good at understanding the different elements and perhaps generating the tests and all of that based on what it has understood from the image. So yeah, so I think the point here is that not all models are created equal. I think that when you practice, you find out that every model is good at something and not good at something else.
You know, the interesting thing for me is I started writing a rules file and then I thought, why am I doing this? So I went to the AI itself and I said, could you write me a rules file that includes these things? And it provided a rules file. And I'd say, oh, but I don't like this. Can you make me a new one? And it actually generated a nice rules file. So I built a nice application. Eventually it's a simulator that I'm going to be using as I'm writing some articles. It did a pretty good job. And I said, why don't you write me a prompt that would generate this application? So the cool thing about this is it's a tool that helps you learn how to use the tool. It will teach you how to use it better. And since I'm such a big proponent of learning as part of the job, you know, why would I not go about doing a thing, and then when I finally get the right thing, how would you have asked for this? You know, how would you write the prompt for this? How would you generate the rules file? These, I think, are good things. And also, surprisingly, I didn't know to do this at first. Somewhere, I don't know, a day or two or three into the journey, somebody had said to me, well, do you let it ask you questions? I'm like, well, of course I should do that. And the answer is no, I hadn't. So I came back and I said, okay, here's what I want to do. Feel free to ask me questions. And it did. And it did produce better results. So there is more, it is more partner than slave.
Yeah.
You know, slave is a word for robot. It is more partner than slave. You don't just tell it to do things. You ask it as well and let it ask you. And it can teach you. I'm still on my path.
Okay, so speaking of partners and slaves, I think that let's move now to the next part of our discussion, where AI is the master. So I think that most of our discussion was regarding what I've heard a lot of people call augmented coding. Okay, it's where, as you've said, the AI is basically an assistant or partner. But now we're living in the world of vibe coding, okay, where you use prompting techniques not to generate pieces of code, but actually to generate a full-fledged application. And it does other stuff too, like deploy it and all of that stuff. So this represents a major shift in how software is being built. So I'd like to explore this with you, and I'll start with my first question on this topic, and that is, how do you view the emergence of vibe coding in the broader software engineering landscape?
That's a really good one. There is a realm of things. So let me roll way back in time. So we're talking like 1980 something, right? They came up with Lotus 1-2-3, which later on was Quattro, and later on was Microsoft Excel, right? And they said, oh, this is an end of programming. Now, any business person can have the program they want. They don't have to go through IT. No more dealing with programmers. We can start laying them off. And you know what? They did build a lot of apps in spreadsheets, whether they should or not. And you know what? They were useful. They worked, right? So the ability to generate something that will give me the answers I need, I think, is great for people who aren't programmers. And then later on, we saw the same thing with Microsoft Access. And then you go so far with that, and then you need a Microsoft Access programmer because you can't maintain it. By the way, a lot of places started with spreadsheets and then hired spreadsheet geniuses to come in. I don't know, is that programming? Well, I did it for a year, way back when. Yeah, I did that. Later on, they got the Microsoft Access. They hired Access programmers. That got tough. A little later on, it was, it's always something that's going to eliminate programmers, and it was going to take over the field. But in all of those things, even more recently, low code, no code, right? That lets people have applications they need when they don't have access to the budget or the personnel, to have programmers build things for them. I think that's a good thing. I think they still need to be careful, because you and I know that AIs don't always understand and build correctly. I say understand as if it were capable of that. But the interpretation is not always what was intended. But if you could learn, start writing your prompt, generate the app. Nope, that ain't it. How can I fix this? Get a new prompt, rerun that, and then somewhere in the course of a day to a week, you have an app that otherwise, you probably would have had to hire somebody for. There's probably going to be a lot of little apps generated that really help people out a lot. I think that's a good thing. Unfortunately, like often happened with other technologies, they will assume that that is professional quality and ready to go and secure and safe and expertly made, and that there's no difference because it looks actually just like a hand-coded app. That of course, it's going to be scalable, and then they'll be like the Lotus people. They were using Lotus 1-2-3. They're going to be like, oh, we're going to need an expert to come in here. We're not scaling. Our database is not right. We can't get this to generate the right way. We're not getting what we want out of this thing. We're going to need somebody who knows what they're doing and understands what the errors look like. So I think it's a good thing. So I'm going to go back to that again. I think it's generally a good thing. And by the way, it's a heck of a nice way to start learning a technology. Have your AI generate your first Rust app. Make it a little one and read it. What a great learning path. You can read it, you can debug it, you can modify it, you can make it be wrong so you can see the errors and the compile errors. You can, it's a great laboratory. And a laboratory for software app development, I think, is a wonderful thing. So I am generally in favor. That may be a shock, but it's true.
Yeah, indeed it is. I didn't expect this answer, but yeah, you're right. I mean, yeah, it's not an answer that I expected, but I do agree with what you have said. Okay, so I've noticed that many experts, yourself, Jeff Langer included, focus on applying principles of technical excellence within what's often called augmented coding. We've already mentioned that. And this approach, assumes a solid foundation in software engineering practices. Now, what concerns me, though, with the rising popularity of vibe coding, especially among non-developers, that vibe coding is actually meant to shift your focus away from the codes and focus on, what features should I develop, the value, the user experience, and all of that, and not necessarily on the code quality, because what it's really trying to do is move you away from the code and not pay a lot of attention to code structure, coverage, and all of that. Now, do you see a path where vibe coding could evolve to support technical excellence, or vice versa? Or is it inherently risky when applied beyond quick prototypes or throwaway experiments?
So 𝗬𝗏𝗍𝗆𝗄𝗏, he's the founder of Industrial Logic, and that's what my logo is for. It's Industrial Logic. He has an article on agentic refactoring. And he's found some great ways that he can use AI to help him refactor code in large scale. So, refactoring from the current design to a different pattern, and that it was very valuable to him that way. And we've mentioned writing tests. Also, Adam Thornhill and company, a group of people, I don't remember the other names because I know Adam's name best, have I won't pronounce the name of the article, but I'll try to get you a link to it. They've started using AI, but when they gave it a way to check its work, they went from rather poor results to some pretty amazingly good results. I think that if we follow up on Thornhill's work and Josh's work and others in this area, we might find that the next version of name your favorite editor here, it isn't just the language server protocol. It isn't just the built-in JetBrains refactoring tools. We might be looking at a whole generation of code refactoring tools that can competently move from one pattern to another. Now, realize also that these things, they're just eager puppies. You throw a stick, that puppy's going to run after it. He doesn't care if you threw the stick toward traffic, toward water, towards a ledge. He's just running as fast as he can to get there. They go where they lack direction. They lack common sense. You can ask them to try to, consider different facts. But ultimately, if I say, take this code and refactor this to use, I don't know, a NoSQL database in the cloud, with and set it up to be a billion trillibytes. I'm just making up numbers now and names for them, and really scale this thing out. It's going to go, yeah, absolutely, boss. Let me go. Boop, 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 boop. There you go. And suddenly your runtime costs are absolutely astronomical, right? And what you've built is totally stupid. And I mean, unneeded, unwanted, unuseful. There was a study recently. I don't remember the people's names. If I could name of the article, maybe somebody here can post it for us. They found out that you can give your AI any ridiculous idea. So you give it an idea that you want to build an application that helps dogs learn to oil paint. And by golly, it'll charge right in there and do your stupid thing. Whereas any intelligent human being that you happen to discuss it with would say, no, dogs don't want to oil paint. They're not even interested in oil paint. If you want to do that, you could probably get a an art grant or an animal behaviorist grant, but there's no market for dog oil paintings, and I don't know why you would want to do this, and it's going to make a mess of your house and annoy the dog anyway. Dumb ideas are just ideas. They don't have taste and judgment. They are eager puppies. So we have to watch that as well. But yeah, okay, sure. Within boundaries, it's all fine.
Yeah, and I think that in the future, models are going to get smarter and obviously be able to question what you ask them to do. They're going to do it anyway, but at least before they do it, they're going to tell you, okay, but this is not usually how people do things. Yeah, I think Jeff Langer said, was that 𝗬𝗓𝗃? I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it might have been. I think that may have been him. That's the why AI isn't going to make art guy. It could be. I'll have to go see if I can dig it out of my history.
Okay, so I have no more questions. I think that this was a very interesting discussion regarding this topic. And as you've said at the beginning, we live in very interesting times. And I'd like to add also very dangerous times. Again, I'd like to say that I appreciate a lot what the team in Industrial Logic are doing, along with other people in the community like Jeff Langer, trying to teach people how to properly use this technology. Because, yeah, as you've said, it's going to do whatever you tell it to do. So unless you tell it to do the right thing, yeah, you can end up with a big mess.
I think in the hands of a disciplined professional, there is so much potential. And by the way, the same is true in the hands of mad children who don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay. So Tim, thanks a lot for. We have one last question. We don't want to make our audience sad. So, okay. So Hassan Ibrahim, how LLM could be used with co-creation patterns? Oh, okay, that's a good question.
By co-creation patterns, are we talking about the like human co-creation, mob programming, ensemble programming, or are we talking about something else? I just want to get my definition.
Okay, Hassan, so if you're listening, perhaps you could further elaborate on your question. Okay, let's just assume, Tim, that this is what he means by co-creation patterns. So what is your answer to that?
Well, I haven't really considered it, so I don't have a considered opinion. But I think that inviting it into our programming sessions so far has been really helpful. We don't spend time stuck when we can have it, give us different ideas. I've found it to be a reasonable, when you're doing your ensemble mob programming, whatever you want to call it, and then somebody peels off to go look things up. I have less interruption for that because I can say, hey, is there a good way to do whatever? And it does a web search and it looks through the material and then it comes back and says, well, have you considered using this tool? And that's helpful. I wish, and I'll tell you my kind of personal dream, I wish that all of them were better trained on the language standards and the libraries, because I still find them very happily, like in Python, it'll write out a function to do something that exists in exactly the same form with exactly the same parameters, often even the same name, that's in 𝗟𝗏𝗘 or functools or somewhere already in the language standard. If it were smart enough, well educated, not only in what do people write in Python, what does consumer written Python code look like, what's out in the repos, but if it actually knew something about the Python code itself, the language and its libraries and its plugins, it probably would be a better partner for us, because it would do that wonderful thing, the most beautiful of all partner behaviors. A, it would say that shouldn't be done, or B, it would say that already exists. And I think that, that's one of my favorite moments when it says, have you used 𝗟𝗏𝗘s for this? It's got a function called product and it will take care of what you want, right? Or combinations, or, but yeah, I find that it's not a problem at all that it actually sits in as an additional aid to whoever is typing. Face it, in mob programming, one person operates the keyboard. Their job is to implement the will of the team by entering into keyboard, and we always have to find the level of instruction that driver wants, right? Well, now they have an LLM, and it's like, well, why don't you create a new class that has these 4 fields, and there it is. Well, that's fine. I think it accelerates, it's good at the typing part. And then sometimes it's also maybe good at suggesting a break every so often if you ask it to. We use timers usually. So yeah, I'm all up for it. I think it's not a new dynamic, but it makes some things easier.
Yeah. So I think the answer to the question is that, yeah, you can use it. I remember when Jeff Langer appeared on the podcast, I think the title of the session was something like working with humans and non-humans collaboratively in programming. So I think that Jeff was one of the very early people to realize that, it's just another person in the room, but I'm not going to say person, but some creature, but it's a non-human.
By the way, Jeff is clearly, and I will happily admit it, well ahead of us in the LLM usage. He's much further along that path than I am. So I still take clues from him and I listen to him. He is, and he's also a disciplined developer. And I know that he is using, proper code disciplines and hygienes in the use of LLMs. And I trust his judgment on these things.
Yeah, I fully agree. Just one note to add that I watched this interesting video for Tom Blomfield. It was titled "How to Get the Most Out of Vibe Coding," and one of the interesting things he said about LLMs not really knowing a specific piece of technology is that with the increase in size of tokens, what you can do right now is give the LLM the link to the guide to whatever technology or programming language you're using with examples, and it will read that, it will use that as context, and this will help it actually write code that makes sense with this specific piece of technology. So yeah, maybe this is something that people can try out. Just tell the LLM, use the following guide as an example or as a reference. It will go to the website, it will parse it, it will understand the examples, and it will use it to formulate something that actually makes sense. So yeah, and
maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll point it at when I'm in Python. I'll point it at the Python module of the week, an incredibly good website. If you do Python, go read the Python module of the week. I've also, by the way, just given you a link, and you've just put it on the screen, for the 𝗬𝗏𝗡𝗍𝗏-Ennis-Monis, I'm not sure the pronunciation, the article on using AI with fact checking. It's either going to be chilling or exciting, depending on where you stand on the issue to begin with. But I think there's potential here.
Yeah, this looks like an interesting article. I think I have to read that.
Well, thanks for the tip. I'll do that.
Yeah, I've read the paper recently that was, I happen to be preparing a PhD in large language models, so I know a thing or two about how they work. So I've read a paper recently that was published by Microsoft saying that in the very, very, very near future, we're going to see LLMs that can take inputs and produce outputs up to 1 billion tokens. So, people are really working hard on LLMs not losing path with long context. So I think that in the very near future, we're going to have models that can take up a couple of books, not just one book as a reference, a lot of guides, a lot of examples, and use that to produce very, very high quality outputs. And it will be able to take like all of your code base as a reference and not break things up the way it does these days. So, and according to the paper by Microsoft, this is coming very soon. I see that Chinese are going that way with their model called Qwen. But I haven't used it yet, to be honest. But I think Qwen so far can take up a lot of tokens as input and generate output. So that's interesting. I think people can try that out. I know that things between the US and China these days are not on good terms, but in my part of the world, we don't care. We're like in the middle. So
I live in the UK.
Whatever that we use.
Yeah, since I'm UK resident, it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, but it is interesting. It's sort of, I wonder if we're paralleling Moore's law for hardware, but now for AI.
Yeah,
I'd like to see it graphed. It's rapid, but Moore's law, the initial burst with the doubling of transistors per device, it took a while to start slowing down and to reach what looks like nearly a theoretical maximum due to tunneling and such. So maybe we've got a way to go, and we're accelerating in that space, that maybe there's a doubling of tokens per whatever. If you give or graph it, send it on. I'd love to see it. You're the researcher. Send me graphs.
Yeah, sure. Will do. So yeah, but I think that also in the very near future, we're going to hit a ceiling, because we've been using pretty much the same architecture. The way these LLMs are built, it's built on the same concept since 2018. And I think that, and actually, I think this is going to be a good thing. Meta has just announced that they are unable to make their latest model perform better than the older one. So some people say now they're out of the race. We're waiting for the other vendors to, hit the same ceiling. But I think that this will give us a chance to look at the more important things, scaling and actually using the technology. It's moving so fast that let's just stop and take a chance to be able to see how we can use this. So I think that, we will hit the ceiling also pretty soon. Maybe if somebody discovers something new, then all of what I'm saying is wrong. But if we hit that ceiling the way Meta has already hit, maybe that will give us the chance to slow down a little bit and, try to see how we can use the technology in a better way.
Yeah, we just need to come to terms with the technology in front of us. We'll do that. We usually do, but we will probably stumble along the way because we usually do.
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask the audience, does anybody have any more questions? I think we can wait for like 20 seconds or something. I think, Tim, you've shared something. That's the same paper, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's the same paper.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we've reached the end of today's really, really good session. I personally enjoyed it a lot. I hope our audience has enjoyed it too. Tim, I'd like to thank you a lot for accepting our invitation and for making the time to appear on our podcast today. Thanks for the wonderful and very useful insights, and keep contributing. You're a very valuable member of the software development community. I've personally learned a lot from your books, from your articles, and from your employer, Industrial Logic. I've watched most of the albums, and I think that you guys are doing a great job. And we hope to see you again soon on the podcast if you have the time.
Yeah, well, as 𝗬𝗏𝗍𝗍𝗍 would say if he were alive today, be sure to like and subscribe.
Okay, so to everyone around the world, thanks a lot for being with us today, and we'll see you in the coming episode. Thanks a lot.